But let's jump into it. And why don't you give us some color on you and your history from the days when you were in North Carolina, and kind of like you said, like how you sort of went from lily pad to lily pad and where you are now.
Good way to describe it. So the early days in North Carolina was when I struck out on my own. And I arbitrarily put the date 1999. There wasn't an absolute moment where I said this is it. It was a gradual transition to becoming the business owner that I am. I started out doing research and exit interviews and what are they called? Facilitation, group facilitation. My clients were employers who were struggling with understanding the turnover in their organization. Why are these people leaving? And they hired me to do exit interviews of those people and to facilitate these conversations without the leadership of the group of the company present, feeling that the employees would be more candid with me than they would be with them. So I would compile what I learned from these conversations and essentially turn it over to the employer in a 3-ring binder saying, here's the executive summary, if you will, but here are the causes of turnover. At the time, it was just as Generation Xers were becoming known in the workplace, and their behaviors were becoming something that people could identify clearly and say, oh, that's a very Generation X behavior. And in order to get more business doing those exit surveys and focus groups, I would go give a presentation to a local HR group in Charlotte and say to the local HR chapter, I'd love to be your luncheon speaker so I can share these trends. And they accepted, and I began to go out and deliver these things. And the employers in the room would say, hey, we'd like that presentation. And I said, well, I'm really not here to give the presentation. I'm here to get booked to do more of these research and exit surveys. And they said, no, we don't need that. We need the presentation. Everything you're saying we know is true. And it's our leadership at my company that's struggling to understand this. You deliver it in a way that I think they could understand it. Would you come to my workplace? And then they said, we'll pay you to give the presentation. I went, oh, really? It's a foreign idea. Oh, really? So that was kind of the first lily pad, to use your metaphor, which I love, by the way. And these organizations would then say, I'd like you to do that at the regional HR meeting and then the national HR meeting. And it began to grow. And I would deliver this content on the trends that we were studying and began to charge a fee to give those presentations. And that was 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
Today, not those people, but people still hire me to deliver those presentations of trends taking place in the workplace, in the workforce, and the marketplace. We've added the marketplace since then, helping people better understand the motivations of their employees. And what I'm known for in this space is segmenting the population by generation. So here's currently, here are the characteristics of the Gen X manager and leader. Here's what he or she is most commonly known for. And I give a description, and most people in the room listening will understand that description. Oh, I know that. That reminds me of so-and-so, or I can see myself in that. And here are the different generations you're managing and leading. And here are the millennials, and here are the baby boomers, and here's Gen Z, and here's what they're looking for, and here's where these challenges and frictions occur. And here's the solutions that I found to those challenges and frictions. And there were years that I did 100 of these a year. Wow. Now I'll do 30 just because it became a huge lifestyle problem of living on the road. And I'll do 30 a year and be able to prepare for them. And I don't live on the road anymore. And that is the bulk of the revenue that I generate, is doing the research, writing the books, developing the training programs, and delivering the presentations. And I've got a guy that delivers presentations of my content for me when I'm unable to do so.
Okay.
And in that process that's the bulk of it. I have a radio show that's broadcast across the state of Alabama called What's Working with Cam Marston. We're in 6 markets right now with hopes of growing. In fact, the rest of the day will be spent on growth plans on that. And it's through these interviews, through the radio show, that I'm learning the solutions to many of the problems that my clients have. So I book guests on the show that I know have insight into the solutions. I interview him or her. I'm writing furiously. I re-listen to the interview, and then I take the nuggets from that interview and I'm able to bring it to my clients and say, hey, you're struggling with turnover. Here's what this guest said. And I'm able to provide, I call it somewhat, I don't know, this is very self-indulgent, but tip of the spear content for these people who are struggling to figure out turnover. I'm able to say, I've had 5 interviews in the past 10 weeks, people that are doing new things. Here are how they're doing it. Let's give it a try. So the radio show provides content to the seminars. The radio show also is a very small profit center, but I began it for a number of reasons, one of which is to continue with the research in a new way that I felt like it was fun for me. And I love doing it. Absolutely love doing it.
Yeah, no, that's it. There's a, we have a very similar thought process in that, because I enjoy learning about other people's businesses, and really one of the problems I see with the internet at large is most of the content out there is just regurgitated generalistic information that is not where someone has gone to the place and seen the thing.
Yeah.
They essentially just say, oh, well, this person said it and that person must know what they're talking about, so it must be right.
Yeah.
And that's what seems like is out there. So I really like this aspect of these conversations of learning directly from, people. And then once you start to see patterns.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Patterns, the ones that have become abundantly clear recently, and this is kind of in the weeds where I'm going in the future work, is this progressive employment pattern. How does it work? What does it look like? How are they selling it? So how do I hire somebody using a progressive employment model? Well, I've had 4 or 5 guests all talk about what they're doing and the highs and lows of it and the weak points and the strong points. And from that, I'm able to create a segment of content for a workshop that's really very topical for the audience. And that's the radio show is allowing me to continue that research. I also have a demographer who I hire who gives me data. And I send him questions and he sends me back the data from the Census Bureau, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the things that are also very important for particularly the numbers-oriented people. I still use that stuff. It's very important to particularly some audiences to see the data. But I still like asking the questions and using that content to build a workshop or a segment of a presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it sounds like what one of your strengths would be, is probably taking that data and framing it in a way that is insightful to people, to where that if they just see a chart, they see a chart. Right. And it sounds like you've been, hired to say, hey, tell us what this means and what we can do with it beyond just, hey, it's a chart of numbers.
Well, my expression is I put handles on the data. In other words, I want to show you something that you can grab and utilize. Handles on the data. Yeah. And you can grab it and apply it. It's more than just a chart. It has a function so that you can understand it and do something with it. And that's not the case with every piece of data that I show my audiences, but I generally try to find data that has handles to it that means something to the audience, where we can clearly place it somewhere that means something to them.
Okay. So it's, obviously I've got a few questions that I'd planned on asking, and you really crushed like 4 of them right away, which is great. It's great. I'm always curious about what pushes people to start a business. And it sounds like you were pushed into it to a degree. They were asking for it. You didn't have to sell it, right?
In that situation, yes, they were asking for it. I was not having to sell it. It wasn't long after I began that process that I did begin selling it, to say, I'd love to be hired to give this presentation to your team, to deliver this workshop. So I began selling it. Once I learned I could be successful and found that I liked doing it, I thought, well, in order to keep doing it, ultimately the demand is going to peak. And if I want to raise my fees and stay busy, I got to learn to sell it. So I did have to learn to sell it.
Okay. You think you're naturally a salesperson?
I have become better. I used to hate the term sales. I don't mind it so much anymore. But if I feel like the client needs it and wants it, I have no problem selling it. But I have no problems also backing out of an arrangement that I think I'm just not a fit here. And I'll feel wrong doing this business because this is not a good fit. Now, if they're going to continue to pay me, I'll do it. But I don't have any problem saying this is not a good fit. You need somebody else. So I'll sell when I see that there's a purpose for it and it's the right thing to do.
Well, and I think that matches up with, one of the headlines on your website, which is you're about solutions, you're a fixer, right? That's not a Band-Aid person. You're actually trying to fix the problem.
To help them fix the problem. I don't want them to leave and we're talking about the presentations here. I don't want them to leave my presentation saying that was really great, that was fun. I want them to say that was helpful, that was great, that was fun.
Yeah.
So I've seen so many motivational speakers as I'm waiting for my turn, let's say on a keynote slot, and they come out of the thing and they say, that was just great. Well, I say, what did he say? What was the content? What was the message? I don't know, but it sure was fun. Like, that's just a waste of time.
Yeah. They remember the jokes, but not the meat.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So it seems like, as we talk, we'll revisit this lily pad idea, but as you've sort of dovetailed into each one of these things, so you went from speaking, then what came next after speaking?
Well, the speaking led to developing the workshops. Though it's all kind of under the same umbrella, the speaking led to the workshops, led to the books, and the training seminar. So those were all kind of one lily pad away from each other. Right. And it was about 6 years ago that I took a very different tack and started the radio work, which as I said a moment ago in our conversation, was where I'm getting my current research now. Yeah.
Right. It is. It's a good place. So of all those things, do you love them all? Do you love your children all equally, or is there one you like a little bit more than the other?
There is no replacement, in my experience, for stepping out on the stage in front of an audience. There is a adrenaline rush that's maybe like going over the top of a roller coaster. And there is, for me, it's hell to pay to get there. So let's say I'm doing a presentation in Dallas, and all the airplane work that you got to do to get there and the TSA lines and everything. I don't like getting to the destination. I like being at the destination. So for that reason, I love the presentations. I don't like the travel that's demanded by the presentations. I love the radio interviews. I think that I get a big rush from meeting new people, like what you and I are doing here right now.
Yeah.
Once the interview is over, I'll be on a high for a little while. And I've learned that about myself. And reaching out and meeting new people, and I don't fear the failure of them saying no anymore. And making these connections. We've done over 250 of these interviews, and I'm able to connect these people as they mention needs. I'm able to find opportunities to connect people, and I love that feeling about it. I don't like having to search for advertisers of the radio show. That is painful, difficult work. So every one of these things has a high to it, and the highest high of it is bigger than the lowest low. So I keep going about it. My attitude is, if I like 60% of what I do, then I can gut through the 40% to get to the 60%.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's true. There's never anything that's all, awesome and amazing. It's
no.
I love to mountain bike, and I get this huge high from it, but I sort of drag my feet a little bit about like, okay, I got to get all my stuff together, and then I got to do this.
Yeah.
And then there's never a point during or after that I'm like, man, I shouldn't have done this. It's always, right. I should have done it sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. I can find reasons to not go and do the things that I dislike about it. But once it's over, I think that, I should never have dragged my feet. It was so much fun. Nevertheless, it's the same every time. Telling you what I know, it's the same every time.
Yeah. I have similar feelings about presenting in front of people and standing up, and that there's the work that it takes to get to it is a lot, and it's not really the fun stuff, but standing up in front of a group and seeing their heads start to nod and people talking to you afterwards and asking you additional questions, that's when you're like, okay, that's hard to, walk away from.
That mattered. Those people found it helpful.
Yep.
There are speakers I know out there that live for the ovation. Standing ovation, seated ovation, they live for the ovation. I live for the nodding heads. That's what makes me feel like I've been effective.
Yeah, I agree. I like that a lot too. So I'm gonna kind of focus on the podcast a little bit, but even with the books, this kind of applies. There's a lot of authors now, right? It used to be that being published was like, you had to do so much work to do it. And now you could just make a phone call, have someone write a book for you and publish it in 2 weeks. So I don't want to say that's necessarily changed, but I think from our generation, it was a little bit of a like, oh, you wrote a book. But when you look at your podcast or maybe even your books, what do you think differentiates you? What are the things that you think where you're like, okay, I really stand out from another type of business interview or another type of, because there's a lot of, podcasts there's a lot everywhere. Yeah.
So a couple of things. It's a great question. I view a book as a business card. It's a very thick business card. It's a credibility builder. And there are a lot of people that say, I want to write a book. I should write a book. My plan is to write a book. For me, a book is a credibility builder. And if I'm trying to get someone on the radio show, which is also the podcast, it's developed as a radio show, converted into a podcast. And I'm struggling to get their attention. I send them a book, and I feel like it helps me stand out amongst the others that are trying to get their attention. Mm-hmm. So the first and foremost use of every book that I've written is a credibility builder, essentially a business card. Each book has paid for itself, but it is by no means, I cannot point to a yacht named after my books. That just doesn't exist. It's a business card and it's a credibility builder. So I use the books. That's what makes me different in that regard. The books support the radio show. I've written a book about the radio show, supports the radio show. The books about the generations that I've written support the speeches. And they are meant to help me book more of those presentations. Furthermore, it's not uncommon for someone, for example, doing a program in Gulf Shores not long from now, and they bought 300 copies of the book. Like, hey, that's great. It's not going to put me into I can't retire off of that, but I wrote the book to support the show, and here's gravy. They're going to buy 300 copies of it. The podcast, what makes me stand out, I feel, is that I'm truly looking for insight from my guests that will help my listeners. In the back of my mind, there is some curiosity that I just want to know these people, but in the back of my mind, I'm trying to frame questions that I think my listener will benefit from. And I've also, I read a statistic that most podcasts very seldom go beyond 12 episodes. People will fall in love with the idea of a podcast, and then they realize it's work.
Yeah.
And so I'll be example. I was researching the name of a new podcast for a friend of mine, and I entered it in there, and there were a dozen podcasts with a similar name. Like 2 of them had more than 12 episodes. So one of the things that makes me stand out is, number one, the questions that I ask truly have my guests in mind. And number 2, we've done 275 of them now. So it's not as if this is I woke up with a good idea and now I'm tired of it. This is it's part of who I am. It's what I do, and I'm going to chase it. Guests in mind, and I have legacy behind it to prove it.
Yeah. I wonder, and I like the data of it. I wonder what percentage make it past, the 2-century mark in terms of, because it really is. That's a lot, and it is a lot of work. And I'm glad I got to do this one with you early on, because my wife loves to say that I let life happen to me in a lot of cases. Like, I just show up to places, and I'm so optimistic. I'm like, it's going to work out fine. It'll be okay. It's not a big deal. And in this case, I'm like, you know what? If I show up and try to BS my way through this with Cam, I think I'm probably going to embarrass myself a little bit. So I had to do a little bit more than I initially thought about. So,
well, I think that life happening to you is something the Buddha would say that's the way to go about it. The businessman would say, no, you got to drive this type of thing. You can find support for that attitude one way or the other.
That's right. So, tell me kind of about what are some of the unexpected challenges that you've come across, and we're going to talk a little bit about the recent past and a little bit about what we think is going to happen in the future. But what were some of the things that you came through? Because I'll probably repeat this too many times, but I often say that owning a business is a series of uninformed optimism and informed pessimism, right? Like, you're like, this is going to be awesome. And then you find out it is not going to be awesome in any way.
It's going to be awesome and easy. And as soon as people realize I'm out there, they're going to start calling me and asking to pay me.
That's
This
right.
is going to be a no-brainer. Or when somebody, my kids' friends, oh, so-and-so's dad owns his own business. Oh, he must be rich then if he owns his own business. Like, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Where's your boat? Exactly. Yeah. So what were some of the things that you knew going in? You were like, I know this is going to be a home run. And it ended up being this lesson for you that you've carried.
When I first started talking about the generations in the workplace, I don't think there were more than 4 or 5 of us nationwide doing it. And it was shooting fish in a barrel, if you will, getting the work. The way my fees were structured, the few of us that were out there, we were all kind of cutting edge, and I was as busy as I wanted to be. When the marketplace saw how busy I was, everybody else joined in. And now there's probably 10 of them within a mile of me right now. So one of the things that I didn't expect was how competitive the topic would become and how hard I had to work to stay on top of the topic. And I'll admit that I let the competitors get ahead of me. And I had this attitude of arrogance of, I'm one of the OGs on this topic. That should do enough. Well, there's people came in with some really good marketing savvy, new approaches to the topic. And suddenly I found myself competing against them. I trusted a lot of people, and I had people, and one in particular curry favor to me and asked me to be his mentor. He seemed like a nice guy. My wife met him and said, I bet he beats his wife. And what I learned later was he was stealing my clients, stealing all my content. He was really doing some underhanded things. So I went into it with some naivete. I got burned by one person in particular, and I didn't realize how competitive I needed to be. On the radio show front, that's another profit center, not a big one. I didn't realize how hard it is to create a 54-minute, it's got to be 54 minutes on the nose, radio show that's currently broadcast across the state. But the difficulty in doing that, in getting those seconds down correct and finding an editor who understood the need to do so. And that's been a challenge. It remains a challenge because my editor says he's changing and I've got to find somebody new. And it was hard to get somebody up to. A podcast doesn't have to have a hard stop. A radio show has to have a very hard stop or they won't play it. So that was a challenge that I'm learning. And even advertisers, people are very particular with their ad budgets. I thought, hey, I'm a nice guy. I'll put you on the radio. And for that reason, you should sponsor the show. They're like, no, it doesn't work that way. So those were challenges I hadn't anticipated. I've had some very generous people along the way when it comes to the radio show, but those were challenges I hadn't anticipated. I've had some great clients in the speaking world that have booked me repeatedly, and it's still, I've got one client that's booked me the same spot every year for 12 years. And I just can't say enough about people like that. They've just been wonderful. But the vast majority of it is work that I didn't expect. And thankfully, I went about it, found some mentors, some people that will help me, let me sit down and ask them stupid questions. And then they let me come back and ask the same stupid question because I couldn't remember their answer. And they still have patience with me. But there have been generous people that have kept me going through a lot of the challenges that I hadn't anticipated. And thank goodness for those. But those challenges, I essentially smacked my forehead and said, I didn't even know this would be a problem. I was unaware that this challenge existed out there. I see it clearly now. But when I said I want to do this challenge was not on the radar. Thank goodness it wasn't. I don't know if I would have done it.
Well, that's right. If we saw the things in front of us, probably wouldn't get started. So I have a quick question for you that I never thought about this until you said it. Is the reason why you structure your open the way that you do on the podcast that I listen to is to get the timing of the interview right to 54 minutes? Is that your make weight?
There's all kinds of that going on throughout the show. The length of the music, the way I structure the open, how quickly I close, all of that is a factor in this thing. Did you ever watch the television show Frasier?
Yeah.
Frasier had Roz. Do you remember Roz? She sat on the other side of the window and she would give him the signals. I don't have a Roz. It's just me. So I'm having to manage all that type of stuff, looking at my computer screen, watching the timer, everything. And you've identified one of the things that I do to get that timing right. Yeah. And every now and then we'll add an advertiser or we'll lose an advertiser and we got to redo all the timing. So it's just I laugh now. I'm getting better at it, but it's been 6 years of mistakes, and I still can't get this thing right. If I had a Roz looking at me going, "Stop talking in 20 seconds," it'd be, "Oh, I never knew it could be so easy." But
That's right.
there's not enough profit in the show right now for a Roz. It's just me.
I got it. Okay. Well, good. Well, good on you for being able to get all that to make sense. So yeah, I was listening to a couple of your podcasts, and I was listening to the opens, and then when you said that, I'm like, that's clever.
Yeah,
that's clever. But
the music is a big part of the bump. We need a 12-second bump. Well, just let the music play. I don't have 12 seconds of content. Just let the music play.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the past and the present. If you were to, and I take COVID out of this because COVID was this crazy thing, but if you were to go back and tell yourself something 5 years ago, what would you tell yourself that you're like, man, I wish I would have known this,
Well, I wish I would have known, and you said take COVID out of it. COVID brought my topic, my quote unquote generational topic, back to the forefront as everybody went to work from home. And then the employers, the CEOs, the people that typically hire me are saying, hey, my millennials won't come back to work. What am I missing about them? Or workplace culture post-COVID has become such a big topic. And I know my youngest elements of the workforce are demanding a different workplace culture. What do I need to know? So COVID threw my topic back into the headlines, if you will. And if I had known 5 years ago, if I had known that topic would have resurrected as quickly as it did, I would have said, all right, I've got to become the expert on workplace culture as it relates to getting people to come back to work, as it relates to building teams to virtual teams. So if I had known the significance of workplace culture and what COVID would have done to disrupt it, I would have placed myself in the marketplace as the guy. And we're working on that now. We're going through video of recent speeches, picking clips that address these types of things, trying to position me as one of the people that can get out there and talk about workplace culture post-COVID with virtual teams or teams that only are in presence with one another 3 days a week. That's been a big change.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think I did the COVID exclusion because you go, well, I would have told myself that this is what was going to happen with COVID. But yeah, in your case, that makes total sense that that would have changed. So with that being said, if you're looking into the next 3 to 5 years, what are the things that you've got your eye on? What are the things that you see are opportunities or growth opportunities for you, or that you're like, hey, I think this might actually be a tipping point in in workplace culture?
So workplace progression is one that I think is going to in workplace progression. So there's a couple of things. First, the demographics, part of what I study. I told you I have a demographer. I reach out to him. What are the predictions? The demographics very clearly show that there are many more jobs than there are people to fill them, and that is becoming more acute. So it means the employers are saying, what are the biggest tricks for hiring people? What do I need to know? Which leads me back to that comment that I made on workplace progression, meaning if I'm the employer, here, I'm going to hire you, and here's what I'm going to teach you on day 1 through 30. Day 31 through 90, here's where we're going to grow your skills. Day 91 through 180, here's how we're going to grow your skills. It's a plan for bringing them up to speed, giving them new skills, and with each elevated skill gets a new pay grade. So I foresee going forward more content that my clients will need around how to structure this thing, how to enact it in the workplace, and how to quote unquote sell it in the recruiting process. Come to work for us. We've got this plan for growing your skills. You're going to make more, down the street initially, but if you stick with us for 18 months, you will earn more than you will down the street. We're going to put you on a career path, not just give you a well-paying short-term job. So I think that's where the workplace is going in the near future. And I think the more I can bring my content in the radio show towards that, recognizing that pain point of my my listeners, the greater the opportunity for the growth of the show. My hope for the radio show is ultimately it becomes a Gulf Coast business show that is broadcast between South Texas to deep into Florida. And I think it's a reasonable request considering the acute concerns in the workplace today. I've got to learn to market that show to get it out there. The show brings education to the listener. The listener in turn says, who is this guy? Is he available to lead a workshop based on what he's learning? And my website and everything continues to move towards, I want to engage the listener to find out who I am so that they can in turn engage me to do what actually is making money right now, which is giving the presentations and the workshops. Right. So in theory, they all build upon one another. And the more I can spread the show outside of Alabama, the greater the reach, the more opportunities I have to travel and deliver that stuff. That being said, I don't want to do 100 dates a year, but I wouldn't mind doing 30 to 35 full paid dates a year. That's the goal.
Yeah. So that's where the geographic target or constraint comes from for you, because this isn't it's not a Southern problem, right?
No, definitely not.
It's a global problem, but it's due to your travel and how you want to travel and the lifestyle that you're trying to cultivate for yourself. That's why you're trying to make it a Gulf Coast thing.
And I think it's reasonable. I think it's an achievable goal. And if I can say there is a Gulf Coast business show, it would attract the attention, hopefully, of the stations in the Gulf Coast saying, well, we don't want a business show out of New York that my listeners in Shreveport may not be able to relate to. We don't want a business show out of LA that my listeners in, Loveland, Texas can't relate to. We want somebody that's kind of like us. And I can put a little drip in my accent, make sure the guests have a little bit of an accent and say, this is a regional issue. And we're talking about the uniquenesses of the growth of the Sun Belt or something like that to make it feel about us. And I think there's some genuineness in that as well. It's not just a marketing pitch. That's not to say if I find somebody in wherever in the US that has something good to offer, I'm going to put them on. Yeah. And my goal is to bring content. If I can bias it towards the Southeast, through the Sun Belt, the Gulf Coast, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah. No, well, I think what you say though also that translates, because we tend to think that our problems are unique to us in a lot of ways. And if someone, is coming from Detroit, Michigan to come down here to tell us in, Montgomery, Alabama, how to do something differently, you're kind of like, well, how do you understand my problem? What do you know?
Instantly a wall up. You're right.
Yeah. No, I like that. I agree with that. And I think is being here, living it, knowing it, that and understanding kind of the pace of who works here, because it is a very big umbrella to say millennial, right? Or Gen X. They're different mentalities in different parts of the United States and different cities that they live in. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay. I like that. That's cool. So you brought up marketing, right? And about kind of how you plan on doing some of that. And I kind of wanted to get an idea of like, what's your relationship with marketing? You're very active, which is in and of itself a marketing tactic. Being busy, producing content, that's marketing. But how do you feel like as a business owner, is it something that you're trying to get in the middle of, or is it something that you're like, I'll get to that in a minute?
It's a great question. And I was taught this by an icon in the speaking industry back in the day, when I asked him, how do I build my business? How do I get busier? How do I raise my fees? And his comment was, the more you work, the more you work. So the more I get out there and do a good job, the more I'll be invited. So the best marketing I do is delivering a good presentation. So as we're talking about marketing for the speaking, delivering a good presentation is the best marketing that I do. We're in the process of developing a new sizzle reel that should be available in about 2 weeks, 10 days, that will have the new content on it. And we'll put that on YouTube, let the word be known. But by far for me, when I market myself, it is in the moment of delivering the presentation. There's somebody in the room going, I like that idea. I need to contact so-and-so on my team and ask if we can get this guy to come do it for us. So in that regard, the most effective marketing I do is delivering high quality product. And I suspect that's the case for many people. When it comes to the other stuff, I have a teammate named Helen Broder. She lives in Wilmington, North Carolina, and she does a lot of the marketing, the outbound stuff, calling the financial planning industry and saying, "Hey, Cam has a unique expertise in this. Let me send you his video and his materials." She does a lot of that, and I'm always available to jump on a call to help secure that opportunity, whatever it may be. When you get into an area like internet marketing, like social media marketing, like website development, the world of social media market, the world of Google AdWords, the world of buying all that stuff is a black hole of money for me. I know I need to do it, but it is a painful spend. And you got to wonder, what is the value of a like? You know, someone clicks on a video. What is I could probably figure out what I paid for that, but what is the return on that? And it seems to me, I'm very cynical here, and I admit it, and I've outsourced it as a result. But it seems to me, everybody in the social media marketing world, everybody in the Google AdWords world, whatever that world may be, when I say, all right, what's the results? Their answer is usually the same. You haven't given it enough time. And if you really want results, you need to throw more money into it, which is a beautiful answer for somebody who's in the business of selling, air.
Yeah.
And it's just a painful spend. And I do it. I see the clicks go up. I see the comments come in, and I think, well, I guess that worked. But leading to what? So I have a cynical attitude towards social media and internet marketing, mainly because I've paid a fortune for it, and I can't identify any results. With one notable exception, 15 years ago, when I did a Google AdWords purchase, and when the topics that I'm speaking on were still very new at the time, a lady from GE, who I still keep up with, clicked on it. I paid 5 cents for her clicked on it and booked me for what ultimately became, over a 5-year period, probably 80 presentations and 1,000 books. But that was beautiful. It hadn't happened since. And maybe I should be grateful for that and just say, hey, most people don't get that.
Right.
But that was a good one. I became a darling for GE for a while, back when they were a different company than they are today. And they kept me busy. But since then, those money just seems to evaporate, with the answer being, well, you haven't given it enough time and you need to spend more money. Like, that's the answer for everything. That's your answer to everything.
Right.
If it hurts now, pay me more so it'll hurt more. And then you'll know.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The reason why you're not warm is you haven't quite lit enough money on fire.
Exactly.
Let's just burn more of it, and that'll warm you up.
That's exactly the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
And I have people that I think are smarter than me saying, hey man, you just got to do it. And I look at every business, so many businesses are doing it. And I think, well, maybe they know something. It's not smart to follow without asking questions, but that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. You mentioned the one, 5 cent click, but do you feel like there's anything else that is, and maybe, right, like we all want, I think that big expectation is, and that's a question I'll ask people sometime, is like, what's your expectation of marketing? It's like, well, I'm going to spend $1 and I'm going to get 5 back.
Yeah.
And it's a very valid thing. Like, what's the value of an impression? What's the value of a like? What's the value of a comment? And it's sort of nebulous, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to put that on there. And you even have to wonder, if one impression is worth nothing, is 1 million impressions worth something?
Right.
And what does that density do for you? But kind of going back to the question is, what do you feel like has been a winner for you? What are the things where you look at and you're like, I get this, I see the value in it, even if it's really not a day-to-day thing where someone's calling me and the phone's ringing and it's driving that?
I think the sizzle reel that I have, and the new one I'm developing, is a valuable tool. As long as it's out there on YouTube, I think it's a valuable tool, and we drive people to it to take a look. and I've said this, the books are a form of marketing that I've written. I send them in advance. It gives me some credibility. Books are marketing. But there's not one thing, and I'm sure I'll prove myself wrong in time with this statement. There's not one thing that I can point at that says this is the best marketing tool that I've created and I use it regularly. Yeah. There's not any one thing that comes to mind in that regard. That's kind of what you're asking, isn't it? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, no, I think you answered it though with the books and with the sizzle reel and those types of pieces. There's sometimes where, I know there's some businesses that just do really, really well only doing social media.
Yeah.
And they get a lot of business from it and it works out that way for them. But it's situational and it's because it's their business. And then of course they're going to say, oh, everyone has to be on social media and you have to be doing these things. And I mean, people tell me all the time, like, oh, we love the stuff you guys post. Yeah, but you're not calling me to say that you want me to do it for you.
Right, that's right.
Right.
I'm so happy I make you happy. What happens next?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then at some point you're like, well, I'm just doing it for me. I don't care whether or not you like it. I'm just doing it to entertain myself. But yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I think you really hit it, which was the elements that are really sort of tangible for you tend to be the ones that you have the most the most belief in. And I wonder, because I find some of it to be by industry or by job function or sometimes generational. Do you feel like because we're a little bit older that, physical things like handing out a business card is a sense of satisfaction in some cases to people, whereas others, it's just the connection? Do you feel like generational?
Maybe so. I feel like I know that business card works. It works for me. It's, the way I was trained. I think I fall back onto, we all fall back onto these trainings, these messages, these learnings that we had early in our career and think this is the way things should be done. So. Maybe that tangible item makes me feel like something is truly getting done the right way. I don't know. It's so difficult now, and maybe it's always been difficult, but it seems more difficult now, of trying to find the thing that works the best, and there's not one. And I think maybe I'm trying to broadcast my marketing to too many people. I need to narrow my target down, and if I could continue to narrow the target, as someone said, you're going to get broad by going deep. Go deep. And right now I'm probably broadcasting too much and not going deep enough. I don't know. You can tell I don't have a clear answer to these things. It's a frustration that I don't have a clear answer to these things. And I feel like I should. I don't know what works well anymore like it used to. And I'm selling a non-tangible thing. I'm selling a speech. I'm selling a radio show. I'm not selling a calculator. I'm selling an idea and an enthusiasm versus a tangible item.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know that there is any more a one thing to do. I think it's really difficult in the fragmentation of people's attention and their ability to, I've got two computers sitting here and a phone over here and TVs up on the wall, and it's hard to keep anybody's, it used to be bad in the early 2000s and now it's even worse. And
I know. Even all this radio stuff that I do, I keep looking at the data. Every now and then I look at the data. I don't keep looking at the data or it would depress me, and see how fewer and fewer people are listening to the radio. And I love the medium. I'm absolutely making poor decisions by saying, I love it, therefore that's where I'm going to go. My kids get in their cars and there's this big square thing in the center of the dash. And they're like, what is that? That's the radio. What is FM? Please don't talk to me anymore. What is AM? And I read the other day that they're thinking of new vehicles will no longer have AM radios on them. Like, oh my gosh, why do I love this medium so much? And continue to dive into it. But there's a part of me that says there are I don't need 315 million people, whatever the population of our nation is. I don't need 315 million people to know about me. I need, let's say 200,000.
Yeah.
And if I can get those 200,000 from those, I can get 30 dates a year. I can get new advertisers, et cetera. How do I find my 200,000? Where are they? Well, there got to be 200,000 people somewhere between Texas and Florida that listen to the radio like me. And they're going to look and sound like me. I mean, that's who listens. So let's go there. Narrow the focus. Don't try to do it big. And if somebody outside the norm hears it and calls, great. But let's focus on these 200,000 that is reasonable to think that you could attract their attention.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a, yeah, I've heard the quote before that niches make riches.
Exactly. That's the quote. That's the quote. And it's crazy to think that FM radio might be a niche.
That's right. That used to be the mass media.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
now it's a niche for sure. Yeah. I don't remember the last time I turned on FM radio.
I know. And that's the problem. It really is.
Yeah.
It's it's the challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know. All
right. Well, look, we're going to wrap this up with a little bit of fun stuff. So, tell me what the first concert you went to.
The first concert I went to was a Jimmy Buffett concert. I was taken by my friend Paul Russell's mother. She took about 6 of us to the Jimmy Buffett concert here in Mobile at the Mobile Civic Center. He is a Mobile native, so everybody in that room thought that they had some connection with them, and they were all screaming his name like they were best friends. And the way I understand it, he was eager to get the hell out of Mobile, and he didn't want to see any of these old friends. But it was here, and I remember sitting in that row on the floor with Mickey Russell leading all of us little teenagers into the Jimmy Buffett concert. We'll never forget it.
That's awesome. Okay. First car.
My first car was a Honda. Well, the first car that I drove was a Ford Bronco, and that was a car that I had when I was 16. My father had a boat right at the time called a Robalo, a center console, and he needed a big car to tow that boat. It was heavy. He kept it in our garage, and he towed it with a Ford Bronco, and I drove that during the week. The first car I ever bought was a beat-up old Honda Accord that was held together with chewing gum and masking tape. Got caught in a hailstorm in Denver, Colorado. And once that hailstorm was over, it looked like a dimpled golf ball. I took the insurance settlement and spent it on something else and continued to drive that dimpled golf ball till it was dead. And I had to pay somebody to come get it. And I spent a moment of alone time with it saying, we've been through places. And I shared stories with the car, got out, they towed it away. Old Honda Accord.
I love it. What year?
I bet it was a 1984, thinking about it now.
Wow.
That was an 84 Accord. I got rid of it in 95.
Good. You put some miles on that thing.
Twice from Mobile to Glacier National Park, Montana, twice.
Wow. Okay. That's a good one.
Oh, I'll never forget that car.
Give me 3 books that I should read.
The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope.
Okay.
I loved it. And you can see it's bookmarked. It's a very non-traditional book for me, and I went into it with a little hesitancy. I loved it. I've since introduced myself to Stephen Cope. He's been on the radio show a couple times, and I'm in the middle of one of his online courses. It absolutely was helping you find out what your purpose is. I loved that book, and I continue to reference it, hence the bookmarks. I sit down every now and then when I'm having a blue day and pop into this thing and come out very quickly feeling differently. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a fiction book, The Pillars of the Earth. I forget whether you wanted fiction or nonfiction, but I loved The Pillars of the Earth. That is just a page turner. It's a beach book, and couldn't get enough of that. And then the final one, I would say anything by Cormac McCarthy.
Somebody else, I think, recently had suggested him as an author.
All the Pretty Horses is what it's called. Yeah, that one was great.
Okay.
So a lot of people have businesses books, and it's a question I ask on my radio show. I'm ashamed that I don't have as many business books that have transformed me, but those are the ones I go back to perhaps explains my middling business successes that I can't even listen.
No. And I'll just, so, I mean, even I'm a big soccer fan, and I even find that reading about soccer and the history of that can help me to understand different ways to do things.
Yeah, good.
And so I don't think you have to read business to get business takeaways from it. I think you could, it's no matter what you kind of consume. But I do find that a lot of people that own businesses and run businesses and are busy do like to read and do, find joy in learning something new. So
I tell you, podcasts have become the new reading for me anyway. I drove home from Birmingham not long ago and listened to several, and had several books on tape as well. But I very seldom sit down and read a business book with aggression like I once did. I'm now thinking, all right, there's certainly 1,000 business tactics that I don't know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't inspire me like it used to. This has been a better business book about what to pursue than anything I've touched on. And there's probably a business book about how to write a better proposal that would really transform me. I'd still rather read this. And in a limited amount of time, I'm going back to that.
Yeah, no, the big laugh came when you said books on tape, because that's what I call it too still. And
yes, exactly.
I listen to Audible. Like, I don't read anything anymore. I just listen to it. I can consume it so much faster. All right, last thing is really just, what do you, when you have free time and when you want to wind down, what do you like to do?
We have my father, my brothers, and I share a boat on Dauphin Island, Alabama. We'll go out on there. I used to be an aggressive fisherman. My wife and I just go out now and we'll float, find a shallow spot on the beach and float around there. I've got a wonderful group of friends, and we get together at least once a week, if not twice a week, in the afternoons and sit around and tell stories. I'll smoke a cigar about once every 3 weeks. I need to be careful because if it were my choice, it would be much more than that. Yeah. But about once every 3 weeks, we'll sit around and have a nice cigar with a friend. I like to collect scotches. I find that finding scotches is much better than drinking scotches. I've got a lot of bottles of scotch with 1 or 2 drinks out of them. So it's the hunt for them that I enjoy the most. So those things, let's see, I always enjoy travel, but we've got 4 kids now between the ages of 16 and 20, and it's really expensive. So travel to me is kind of, it doesn't happen like it used to. I like meeting people, going places, and New Orleans is one of my favorite places in the world. I went to Tulane over there, and I've got a soft spot in my heart for New Orleans. And I love going over there and just looking at weird people and thinking, I'm so glad these people exist. I'm so happy to know that they're out there somewhere. I could get a folding chair and prop up on Bourbon Street and just watch people all day and think weird people are wonderful. Thank goodness for them. And I can always rely on them being in New Orleans. So I love to go to New Orleans and hang out with old friends and just people watch and eat food and go out and hear the music that's so famous in New Orleans. So there's not one thing. And I have friends that are, if free time, they're going to golf. Free time, they're going to go catch a big fish. Free time, they're going to go hunt. And I do that a little bit. But I'm famous for sitting on a hunting stand with the rifle across my lap with a cigar and a sleeve of Oreos going, this is what life is about. And very seldom loading the gun and thinking, well, there's something over there I could shoot, but I'm going to smoke this cigar first. And if it's still there, I'll think about that at that point. I'm not an alpha hunter at all. It's just being outside and alone and quiet. So there's not one thing. There's lots of little things that I enjoy pursuing.
No, I love that. I think we're kindred spirits in that sense. I don't have a thing. I tend to find things I like to sort of dabble in. So I love that. That's great. I think that says it. That all plays really, that all makes sense in terms of the diversity of the things that you do. And
yeah, maybe so.
Involved in that all checks out. I've accessed the data. I've looked at it. That checks out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Helps me feel better. I wonder if I'm not off the rocker every now and then. And as long as somebody thinks it makes sense, then I'm going to keep doing it.
You're going to sleep like a baby tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for your time, Cam. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm grateful for your interest. I'm curious about what you're doing. Like I said, it might the most sincere imitation being the most sincere form of flattery. I'm very curious to see how this goes because it's an idea I may steal.
You got it. All right, Cam. Thanks, bud.